I remember this too, Marla said, pointing to the sign that read, out of order, strung across the stage. My whole life, I felt uneasy when I seen that phrase, and it was just a vending machine. She laughed insecure. I know what you mean, Lamar said softly, but before he could go on, Carlton interrupted. Found it. Maybe, Jessica amended. There was a door, close, set into the wall like the one below the stage. Not quite hidden, but not meant to be noticed. It was painted black, like the walls of the room. Jessica turned the knob and pulled, but it was stuck tight. Locked, Lamar said. I don't think so. Let me try, Marla said. She grabbed the knob and yanked it, and it came open. Excuse me. Sending her stumbling back. Impressive, Lamar said. Yeah, well, taking care of Jason makes me tough. Marla grinned as she knelt down to squeeze through the small door. I was almost the same as the first room, a set of 8 TV screens and a large panel of unmarked black buttons. Carlton fumbled to find the master switch, his hand into a dark corner. Then, with a click, the power came on, and a soft buzzing filled the room. Rich, bizarre reds and blues began streaming in under the door from the stage lights. Outside, Jessica and Carlton began switching the televisions on. They fiddled with the knobs until they were showing pictures, though most were very dark, from where they could see a long shot of the main stage, just as in the other room. But the rest of the cameras were showing other places and angles, while the first control room had only shots of the main dining room. Here they could see into other areas of the restaurant, the private party rooms, which were set up with glittery decorations for events that would never happen, hallways, an office, and even what looked like a storage closet. The room behind them was visible as well. The camera trained in on the out of order song, now lit with otherworldly shades, and the current behind it. And one screen they could see Jason ducking back into the arcade. Maybe I should go get him, Martha said, but no one responded. Carlton started pressing buttons. Spotlights appeared and vanished on the stage in the main dining room as he did, illuminating first one emerald and then another one, lighting up empty spaces where someone might one have once stood. He flipped the switch, and it seemed for a moment that nothing happened. Then Lamar started laughing, pointed at one of the screens. The pizza decorations lining the walls were spinning wildly as though they might leap off and go rolling away. I forgot they used to do that, Lamar said as Carlton brought them slowly to a halt. There was a large black dial to one side of the buttons, and Carlton spun it, but it seemed to do nothing. Let me try, Lamar said. He elbowed the Carlton to the side and pressed another button. There's a high pitched whine. They all jumped, and it quickly faded down to a static hum. Lamar pressed the button again, and the sound was gone. I guess we know that what turns the speakers on, Carlton said. I bet we could figure out how to play the music. Jessica said. She reached forward and pushed something else, and stage lights popped up while the main lights dimmed. The figures on the main stage suddenly stood out a little. Committing attention, she pushed it again, and the lights faded back to normal. I love that, Carlton said. What? Asked Marla. Stage lights, he said. One switch, and it's like a whole another world up there. Another button flickered the stage lights on and off in the room behind them, while another started and stopped the little merry-go-round, its tinkling music grinding too slowly, like the ride itself was trying to remember how the song went. They managed to get the speakers on again without the feedback whine, but they were still static. I have an idea, Jessica said, pushing on the front of the group. She switched on the static again, then started turning the knob back and forth. The hum grew lower in pitch, then higher, responding to her adjustments. Progress, Carlton said. It's still just static, Marla said, unimpressed. Jessica turned it slower again, then snatched her hand from the dial like she had been and punched the button. shutting the speakers off. What? Marla asked. Jessica remained motionless, her hands still suspended in the air. What happened? Did it shock you? Carlton asked. It sounded like a voice. Jessica answered. What did it say? Marla asked, apparently interested again. I don't know. Let me try again. She turned the speaker on again, calling forth the static and lowering the hum as they all listened, intended on the sound as it sank in a lower register. Just below the range of a human voice, they all heard it, grunting and broken words, almost too slow and disoriented to be considered speech. They looked at one another. What on earth? Marlowe said. No, it's just random static, Lamar said. He reached for the controls and dialed the pitch black up slowly. For another fleeting moment, there was a purposeful sound. That sounded like singing, Carlton said. No, Lamar said, sounding more unsure this time. Do it again, Marla said. Lamar did, but this time the static was empty. Is that Charlie? Marla suddenly became focused on a blurry figure moving down the dark hall toward them. Sliding along the hall was enough to remain unnoticed. Charlie was hurrying, almost skipping, and trying to find another place to hide. She glanced behind her, vaguely suspecting that John might be cheating. She moved through the darkness and toward the colorful glow of the small stage curtain, which was throwing eerie reds and blues into the tables and party hats. Going down this passage had always felt like a long and a perilous journey. Wanda not to be made alone. She kept her gaze fixed behind her, letting the wall beside her guide her step. She knew John was close, probably creeping up on her in the dark. Suddenly, she backed into something, stopping short. She had been moving faster than she had thought, or more likely, the hall was not long enough as she remembered. She saw his shadow at the end of the hall as if he turned his head, he would see her. Without thinking, Shirley climbed up into the platform that she had bumped into and ducked behind the curtain, tucking herself between the wall and a large, bulky prop, trying not to breathe. Charlie, he called, still far away. Charlie! Charlie felt her heart beat quicken. There had been boys she liked now and then, but this was something different. She wanted him to find her, but not quite. As she waited, her eyes adjusted to the darkness, and she was able to make out the shape of the curtain and the edge of the stage. She looked up at the object in front of her. No, her body shuddered, then froze. It was standing over her. It was the thing from her father's workshop, the misshapen thing that hung in the corner, shaking by random incohesiveness as its eyes burned silver. Does it hurt? Now it was still, and its eyes were blank and dull. It was staring straight ahead, and to stay in its arms with its hook hung on useless at its side. She recognized his eyes, but he was somehow worse now, encased in hollow body parts and matted with red fur with the stench of oil and glue. He had a name now. They called him Foxy, but she knew better. Charlie shrank away, pressing against the wall. Her heart was racing and her breath was shallow, too fast. Her arm had been touching its leg, and now she felt a sudden itchiness from it, like she had been contaminated. She wiped her hand violently against her shirt as she began to panic. Run. She sprang away from it, pushing off the wall to get away. To move before I saw her by the edge of the stage caught her foot. She stumbled forward, momentarily becoming entangled in the curtain. She struggled to get free, then suddenly the thing's arm jerked up, and the hook slashed at her arm. She ducked away too late and it cut her. The pain was shocking, like freezing water. She tripped backward and felt herself falling for long seconds, and then she was caught. Charlie, are you okay? It was John. She had caught her. She tried to nod, but she was shaking. She looked at her arm. There was a cut above the elbow, almost 4 inches long. It was bleeding freely, and she covered it with her hand. The gaps between her fingers went over as her own blood leaked through. What happened? Ma asked, rushing up behind her. Charlie, I'm so sorry. I must have hit a button that caused it to move. Are you okay? Charlie nodded, a little less shaky. I'm fine, she said. It's not that bad. She moved her arm around experimentally. See? No nerve damage, she said. I'll be fine. Carlton, Jessica, and Lamar came hurrying out of the control room. We should take her to the ER, Carlton said. I'm fine, Charlie insisted. She stood up, refusing John's help, and braced herself on the stage for a moment. She heard her Aunt Jen's voice in her head. How much blood have you lost? You don't need to go to the hospital. She could move her arm just fine, and she would not bleed to death from this. She felt dizzy, though. Shirley, you look like a ghost, John said. We need to get you out of here. Okay, she said. Her thoughts were scattered, and the injury hurt less than it should have. She took deep breaths as they headed for the exit, grounding herself. John handed her a piece of cloth, and she put it at the cut to slow the bleed. Thanks, she said, looking at him. Something was missing. Was that your tie? She asked, and he shrugged. Did it look like a tie person? She grinned. I thought you looked I thought it looked good on you. Jason, Molly yelled as they passed the arcade. Move it or I'm leaving you behind. Jason ran to catch up. Is Charlie okay? He said anxiously. Marla caught her breath and put her arm around him. She's fine, she reassured him. They walked briskly down the same corridor that they entered through. Jason looked back as he was being guided out, studying the pictures on the wall once more before losing sight of them. The color lights from the stage were fading, and the flashlight was throwing shapes and shadows on everything, making their drawings difficult to see. But Jason could swear he saw the figures moving in the pictures. They all hurried back through the empty building and out to the parking lot, not keeping watch for the guard. When they made out of the car, Lamar, who had grabbed the big flashlight, flipped it on and shone it at Charlie's arm. Slowed it down at the cut. Do you need stitches? Marla asked. I am so sorry, Charlie. We're all being careless. It's not your fault, Charlie said. She knew she sounded annoyed, but she didn't mean to. Her voice was tight and clipped with pain. The shock had worn off, but that meant the wound had begun to hurt. It's fine, Charlie said, and after a long moment the others gave in somewhat reluctantly. We should at least get you some stuff to clean it up and bandage it, Marla said, wanting to do something a tone, however small. There's a 24-hour drugstore just off the main road, Carlton offered. Charlie, why don't you go with Marla and I'll drive your car back to the motel, Jessica said. I'm fine, Charlie protested half-heartedly, but she handed Jessica the keys. You're a good driver, right? Jessica rolled her eyes. People from New York know how to drive, Charlie. John lingered a moment as Charlie was getting into Marla's car. She smiled at him. I'm fine, she said. I'll see you tomorrow. He looked at her like there was something more he wanted to say, but he just nodded and left. Okay, Marla said, to the drugstore. Charlie twisted into her seat to look at Jason. Did you have fun? She asked. The games don't work, he said, obviously preoccupied. The drugstore was only a few minutes away. You stay in the car, Marla commanded to Jason as they pulled to a stop. Don't leave me out here, Jason pleaded. I told you to stay, she repeated, a little confused by the fear in his voice. He didn't answer, and she and Charlie headed inside. As soon as they were gone, Jason pulled the drawing out of his pocket. He held up another faint lights of the parking lot to examine. It had not changed back. Bonnie the bunny was reaching toward a child who was facing away from him. Curious, Jason scraped at the crayon lines with his fingernail. The wax came off easily, leaving its trace in the paper. As soon as Marla passed into the fluorescent-lit, air-controlled drugstore, she sighed and pulled her hands on her temples. Oh, he's such a little brat, she said. I like him, Charlie said honestly. She was still using John's tie to stitch the bleeding, and now, in brighter light, she peeled it back to see the cut. The bleeding had almost stopped. It was not as bad as it first appeared, though the tie was irreparably ruined. Hey, she said, how come you brought Jason anyway? Marla didn't answer right away, setting her sights on the first aid out and heading for it. Here we are, she said. What do you think, Gauze? Sure, but don't call me Gauze. Shirley leaned into Marla but was ignored. Antiseptic? Marla continued grabbing the items. The thing is, she said, so Jason's dad and our mom have been married since before he was born. I mean, obviously, and they're probably getting divorced. I know about it, but Jason doesn't. Oh no, Charlie said. They're fighting all the time, Marla went on. It scares him, you know. I mean, my dad left when I was still a little kid, so I grew up with that. I was used to it. Plus, I got to have a great stepdad, but for him, it's gonna feel like the end of the world, and they're gonna not do anything to make it easier. They're fighting right in front of us, so I didn't want him to leave alone with that for a week. I'm so sorry, Marla, Charlie said. Yeah, it's okay, Marla said. I'm leaving in a year anyway. I'm just worried about the brat out there. He's really not a brat, Charlie said, and Marla grinned. I know, he's pretty great, right? I kind of like having him around. They paid for the supplies. The clerk, a teenage boy, didn't bat an eye at Charlie's motherly, blood-squirted appearance. Outside, they sat on the hood of the car. Marla started to open the bottle of antiseptic, but Charlie had out a hand for it. I can do it myself, she said. Marla looked like she was about to argue, but she swallowed whatever she was about to say and handed Charlie the bottle and a piece of gauze. As Charlie awkwardly cleaned her arm, Marla smiled impulsively. Speaking of people we like having around, are you having fun with John? Ow, that stings. And I don't know what you mean, Charlie said permanently, suddenly putting all her attention on her task. You do too. He's following you around like a little puppy, and you're loving it. Charlie bit back a smile. How about you, Lamar? She retorted. Me and who now? Marla said. Here. She held out a hand for the bloody gauze, and Charlie handed it to her, reaching for a clean strip. You're going to let me tape it, Marla said. Charlie nodded and held the gaze on place as Marla reached for the tape. Come on, Charlie went on. I see the way you look at him. Nope, Marla smoothed down the last piece of the tape and put everything back in the bag. Seriously, Charlie said as they got back into the car. You're adorable together, and your names are acronyms of each other. Marla and Lamar. It's meant to be. Both laughing, they headed back to the motel.